Hello, and welcome to this fifth session of the second Southeast Europe and East Med Conference in Washington, D.C., this time taking place digitally. I would like to thank the Delphi Economic Forum for their invitation to moderate this panel. I'm Katerina, Sokou. I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, and I'm also Washington, D.C. correspondent for Kathmerini and Sky TV. I'm honored to have with me Mr. Kostas Fragogiannis, Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister for Economic Diplomacy and Openness, Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Greece to the US, Ms. Alexandra Papadopoulou, Mr. William Antholis, Director and CEO of the Miller Center at the University of Virginia. Madam Ambassador, if I may start our conversation with the broader theme of bilateral relations. We're here to talk about the deepening US-Greece strategic relationship. Greece has become a pivotal player at the time when the need to maintain stability and energy security in the Eastern Mediterranean has become more central for US foreign policy. And at the same time, we hear a lot of Greek and US officials talk about the best relations ever between our two countries. You know the US well, and you also have a great grasp, I would say, of the historical perspective of the relationship. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, why is that the case?
Thank you, Mrs. Sokou, for giving me the opportunity to address and to speak in this forum. Just to give you a context about the present stage of the Greek-American relations, we're living in a world that is about to change. COVID-19 brought a lot of changes up in the surface, a lot of changes that were brewing for some time, and now they're up. Also, the world order, the world security order, as we knew it after Second World War, is facing a lot of challenges. The US is a dynamic, democratic, very open society, and when you serve in Washington like I do right now, we're witnessing all this brewing, all these changes coming up, and of course they will affect American foreign policy, America's posture in the world, and how they view their future. So sitting here, I think in order to discuss the future of the US-Greek relations, we have to answer two questions. Why Eastern Mediterranean matters for the US and why Greece matters in this context. We hear a lot of discussion about America not being dependent on energy resources in Eastern Mediterranean. And by the word, the term Eastern Mediterranean, I mean a greater region starting from the Gulf all the way to the Caucasus and the Balkans. The US now, of course, is not dependent on energy. The US was involved in many thankless, pointless wars that brought nothing to the US. So the US should get disengaged. The US has to review its relationship with the region. A lot of these points are right. Of course, the US is not dependent on energy in the Middle East, in the greater Middle East region. But it's not only the US. Europe is dependent. China is dependent. A host of other countries are dependent. So it's still, energy is still a big factor, a big chapter. But apart from that, we're talking about the US turning to the East, US foreign policy turning to the East, which is correct and normal and understandable. But it's turning to the East because the West is somehow solidified. The EU-US partnership is solid and will last for many, many years. So you can focus on the East when you know that the West is there. But when we're speaking about the European Union, about Europe, then the Middle East, the Eastern Mediterranean, the greater this region is the gateway to Europe, is the gateway to the West. And this is also a region where everything meets. People meet, cultures meet, interests meet. And when a lot of things meet, you have friction, you have upheaval, and you have a lot of interests. Some of them are going to prevail, and some of them are not going to prevail. So there are a lot of repercussions. So Eastern Mediterranean, in this bigger sense of the term, does matter. Why Greece matters in this? I will not speak only about geography. I'll speak about something much bigger. A lot of times we're talking about military might, military power in the Middle East. And of course, military aspect, the military component is very important. But it's not only about armies, it's not only about military. We tend to forget that America's position in the world, of course, has been solidified based on military might, on economic prowess, but also there was a cultural element. Hollywood and Coca-Cola has done a lot for the United States, more than we want to accept. So in this part of the world, Greece is the quiet power. This is a country member of the EU and NATO. This is a country with a solid economy, economy that has been through a very difficult 10 years and survived, a solid democracy, democratic institutions that survived this huge economic crisis of the 10 years. A country with deep historical ties and cultural ties to the entire region, a country that is not perceived as a threat by anybody, but as a partner. I hear the new administration speaking always and a lot of times about values-based foreign policy. And this is very correct. Values-based means that we value the basis of our civilization, of our countries, which is rule of law, democracy, human rights. And Greece is a pillar for that, is a stable pillar for that, accepted by everybody. Greece is not a country that pursues an expanded military agenda. It's not a country that pursues for itself an agenda of division or an agenda of influence. It's a country that goes about with an agenda of inclusion. We're a valid and solid partner. And we're a partner who shares with the US the same approach and the same interest. This is not a transactional relationship. This is a relationship which is based on 200 years of common history, in which we were always on the same side. We were never fought against each other. A relationship that is multifaceted, covers everything from military cooperation to political cooperation to economic cooperation to people ties. This is a relationship tested with time. A bigger country, a superpower like the US, with deeper interest in the region for the stability of the Europe also, and a smaller country which is acceptable to everybody. The pillar of stability which is going to enhance the interests and the relationship of the entire West, the way we speak, we use this term, European Union and the United States, in this volatile region in the world. What a better basis to have a better and deeper strategic relationship in the future. That's why I'm very hopeful about the deepening of the strategic relationship, because it has a solid basis projecting into the future.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Minister Fragogiannis, if I may come to you. I remember as journalists a couple of years back noting that even as relations with the US were greatly improved, the economic potential, the potential of the economic relationship was lagging behind. And arguably, since the Thessaloniki International Fair in 2018, we've actually seen a new wave of US investments materialize in Greece. What do you count as the biggest developments on that front, and what contributed to that effect?
Well, Mrs. Sokou, thank you so much for the kind invitation. I'm honored and pleased to be a member of this panel today and talk about the future of the economic relationship between Greece and the United States. The truth of the matter is that the last time I visited the United States, it must have been last February, if I'm not mistaken, just before the breakout of the pandemic. I had a number of visits, discussions, potential investors, and I realized there was an important and growing interest by American companies to invest in the Greek market. I hope that soon I will come back to the United States and the pandemic will be over and we will be able to have face-to-face discussions in that respect. Now, and as far as FDI, foreign direct investment is concerned, from the United States to Greece, it has increased by 40%, which is significant. But the interesting part is that this goes into R&D and financing major energy and renewable energy and port and naval building projects. So there has been a tremendous progress and interest in this. Of course, the most recent and prominent example of an investment from the United States to Greece is, of course, that of Microsoft Corporation, which I believe it was October this year, announced its plans for the creation of a first data center region in Greece as part of what they call GR for Growth Digital Transformation Initiative. This initiative is a significant technology commitment that supports businesses of all sizes in Greece with technology, resources, and creating new opportunities for growth. As a matter of fact, Microsoft has committed to skilling almost 100,000 people in digital technologies in Greece by 2025. It is an initiative that will obviously empower today and tomorrow's Greek workforce. Of course, it goes without saying that a Microsoft data center region will provide what we call a competitive advantage to our digital economy and will position the country among the digital leaders of Europe. There is, however, other examples that I would like to mention in answering your question, and I'm referring to Cisco, Ernst & Young, Pfizer, Quantum Energy Partners, National Energy, General Electric, Fortress Investment Group, Blink, and Tesla, to name only a few, as there is currently other businesses that pursue investments in the Greek market. Now, at institutional level, we think that we have achieved a great deal since the first US-Greece strategic dialogue, which took place, I believe it must have been 2018 in Washington. And we obviously look forward to the third round in 2021 in Washington again, and hopefully in person. The dialogue has helped also to sharpen up our agenda on the work that we need to do by going forward. And I'm speaking of the 3+1 scheme, which is Greece, Cyprus, and Israel, together with the United States, and the East Med security, building up defense, security in our relationship, as well as a potential for implementation of what we call a number of joint trade and investment projects. In the energy sector, we enjoy a very fruitful bilateral cooperation. We promote diversification of energy sources in routes, in simple terms, to make sure that we do not have all of our eggs in one basket, both for the United States and for Greece and for the European Union. The prioritization has confirmed, it was confirmed last September when the US Foreign Minister, Mike Pompeo, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Dendias, and our Minister of Environment and Energy, Mr. Hatzidakis, and myself met each other in Thessaloniki, and we consider all of our options in as far as energy diversification, especially in the northern part of the country. Now, I remember I had an opportunity to meet with Francis Fanon, the Deputy Minister and Assistant Secretary of State of the United States for Energy Resources, and we together spent time in Thessaloniki, Komotini, and Kavala, visited work sites of various energy infrastructure projects. And I'm speaking of the interconnector Greece-Bulgaria, the IGB, the Nea Messindria gas compression station, the interconnector issue between Greece and Northern Macedonia. We talked about the FSRU, the floating storage and regasification unit in Alexandroupolis, the Kavala Natural Depot in as far as gas is concerned. So there is plenty that altogether constitute what we call a diversified future for the entire region, and Greece becoming an energy hub for Southeastern Europe. So finally, I'm going to conclude by stating the strategic involvement of DFC in privatization schemes of key ports and energy infrastructure projects, again, in the northern part of the country. Already they've done business with Onyx and Black Summit, and there is potential interest to build up additional FDI and additional business of theirs, either as equity partners or financing projects, both for Greece as well as for our northern neighbors and partners. So that we did quite a bit in this past year.
Indeed, and all in the middle of a pandemic. Bill, if I may turn to you, I remember when I first came to Washington in 2013, I visited you at your office back then as managing director. You were at the Brookings Institution, and we talked about. You were kind enough to receive me and share your wealth of knowledge about the Greek American community and the bilateral relationship, and everyone in Washington who was involved in bilateral relations. And I was wondering, how do you see relations evolving during this time since the Greek debt crisis? And do you also share this feeling among both U.S. and Greek diplomats and politicians, officials, that relations have improved greatly during that time?
Well, first of all, Katerina, it's really great to see you, and a real honor to be on the stage, the video stage, with Madam Ambassador and the Minister. I'm very lucky to have been a long-standing participant in Delphi Economic Forum events, and just delighted to be with everyone. And congratulations to Greece, both on the upcoming 200th anniversary of Greek independence, as well as the 2,500th anniversary of the Battle of Salamis. And the reason that I point to the latter and the former is I think moving forward, the issue of the democratic alliance that was forged 2,500 years ago after the Battle of Salamis in the Delian League is at some level, and then again reaffirmed 200 years ago with Greek independence, building on the democratic revolutions that started here in the United States. That common shared democracy, I think, is going to be a big feature of the new post-crisis relationship. Going back to your question of where we were a little over 10 years ago in the last economic crises, at some level, roles were reversed. We both went through a crisis then as now. The United States came out of the crisis, I think, a little bit better and stronger than Greece, which really labored through the crisis. What our mutual friend Yanis Paleologos wrote in his book, one of the 13th labor of Heracles. That's what the Greece crisis went through. And I think that here the role is reversed. The United States is coming out of two crises a little bit slower than Greece, both the pandemic and the democratic crisis that both countries have faced. Greece and the Prime Minister has referred to Greece's performance as a post-populist democracy. And I think the Biden administration views itself that way quite explicitly. President-elect Biden has called for a summit for democracies. He wrote that 9 months ago in an essay in Foreign Affairs, that this would be a priority for him. And it's more than symbolic and rhetorical. I think if you think through, as the ambassador mentioned, a number of the security challenges, this is a practical matter that democracies view these challenges differently than non-democracies and authoritarian states, whether it's the relationship with Russia, relationship with China, and the range of players in the Middle East, and certainly the challenges that Greece and the United States face together in Turkey and the broader Middle East. And I think our common democratic systems are practical matters. We think about our militaries differently. We think about how we budget differently, how we think and plan strategically differently than non-democracies do. And I think that will be an enduring strength in the relationship. And then it also applies on the economic side. If you think about everything from how the coronavirus vaccines were developed in open regulatory systems that view these things differently than in non-democracies, and the strengths and challenges that investment, both public and private investment in biotech companies have in democracies as opposed to non-democracies. These are things that we share and we will have to build on in the coming years. So I do think that it's more than symbolism to think about how democracies cooperate. And here I think that the US-Greek relationship will be a strong one. We often talk about Greek Americans that are involved in leading companies in the United States and that forge those ties. And I think in the biotech world, the number of Greek American leaders in these companies is a symbol of strength in the relationship, and that I hope will be built on in the coming years.
Thank you. As a second round, I would like to focus on the ways to further enhance Greek-American relations and what are the challenges to overcome, if any. Talking about challenges, Madam Ambassador, we've seen the announcement of CAATSA sanctions against Turkey on the S-400 purchase from Russia. And just today, a few prominent Greek Americans published an ad at the New York Times asking the US to support Greece against Turkey's aggression in the Eastern Mediterranean. How does US relations with Turkey influence Greece, and how do they influence our bilateral relationship?
I would like to point out that the Greek-American relations is not defined as against somebody. It doesn't have a negative meaning. It has only a positive meaning. It's a relationship based on common values and common interests. And as Mr. Antholis said, we define strategic interests in the same way because we're democracies. And when it comes to Eastern Mediterranean, in the bigger term of the term, what we want to achieve is the same. It's stability with full respect to everybody's culture, priorities, sensitivities, and a policy of inclusion, not a policy of exclusion. So the relationship between the US and Turkey is another story. And of course, the Greek-Turkish relations is another story. But it's not that we're friends with the US with regard to Turkey or against the US with regard to Turkey. It's not a transactional relationship, the one we have with the US. And I want that to be very well known to everybody. It's a relationship based on the same way we view the world and we view the strategic interests and the same way we face challenges. We have the same value system, democracy, rule of law, respect for the individual, respect for human rights. So this is the cornerstone of our relationship. And of course, Greece is a member of NATO, but also is a member of the EU. That makes a big difference because we're exactly the bridge between the EU and the Eastern Mediterranean. And Greece has a different historical background in the region than the other countries, which is normal. Every country has a different background. So it's a major mistake if we define the Greek-American relationship with regard to something else. It's a relationship that it's self-sustained.
That being noted, and especially the non-transactional aspect of the relationship, I would like to follow up, if I may, and ask you, given that we're having a Biden administration coming out in this January, what are you hoping to, how do you see this relationship going forward with the Biden administration on our region? And are you concerned that the political tensions that we've seen in the past few months and years, frankly, in the US may undermine a Biden administration capacity or willingness to engage in the world?
As I said in the beginning of my first remarks, the US is going through a transformation. There were a lot of forces brewing under the surface for a long time, and COVID-19 brought them to the surface in a more violent way, in a more demanding way. But it's normal. Societies change, people change, countries change. So the US has to face, in my view, to deal with the changes that are happening within the American society. And this is the number one priority of any new administration, of course, the Biden administration. First, the US has to give an answer to the domestic issues, but also give a basic answer to the question that is being heard around Washington for quite some time now. What kind of a role the US wants to play in the world? The two go hand in hand. The domestic situation, the demands of the of the people, of the voters, are the ones who define the political agenda of any administration. So President-elect Biden will have the big task to coordinate the demands of the American political scene with the demands of the US as a big country with interests around the world, and I would dare say a country upon which we're all looking upon the US. We're all looking upon US leadership. This was even very obvious in the last European Council, and US leadership is needed, and but the definition of leadership can be a big thing because you can lead in many ways. So the definition of leadership is very important, and how this is going to manifest itself in the field, and how this will also address the concerns and the questions in the American society, which are very big, poignant, and right now number one priority for any president.
Thank you for that. Minister Fragogiannis, if I may turn to you to talk a little bit more about your steps forward to further enhance economic relations with the US. And one could argue that it was the Greek financial crisis that made it evident to Greece that it has to open up to foreign direct investment, that it needs it more than it needed in the past when I guess credit was easier within the Eurozone. What do you see as the next steps that you are taking to further open up and unleash the potential of the Greek economy and its competitiveness in order to attract more foreign direct investment? And in relations with the US, any specific initiatives that you're forwarding in that regard?
Well, as already said, there is a long-lasting relationship between Greece and the United States. This is not a temporary thing. There is no excuse of going back. There is only one way, and that is the way forward. Greece, as well said by Her Excellency Ambassador Papadopoulou, has been a pillar of stability and will be a pillar of stability in the region. And this is very important to those who make decisions in reference to investing in another country. I often ask myself, what does it really take to invest in another country? Why go to one place versus another? And I think there is 4 or 5 or 6 conditions that I would like to name one after the other that make it very important. And I think that Greece can lead the way towards most of these conditions or criteria. First of all, there has to be political stability. And in the country, as we speak, and with the current government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis, we hold an absolute majority in the parliament, and there is political stability way beyond what one would think. Second, economic growth. And if we, for a minute, leave aside the pandemic, which will eventually go away, there has been tremendous improvement in the country since 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. The crisis regretfully put the American investments at a lower level. I mean, considering the size and the strength of the United States, the American FDI should have been higher, and it is on its way to becoming higher as we speak. Third, you need to have the security and the safety and the institutions and the justice in place. And as said already, Greece is a country that one can find all of these institutions to perform quite well. 4, it is important to have a set of incentives and social cohesiveness and make sure that you are welcomed in undertaking initiatives towards attracting foreign direct investment. And my goodness, it has been paying back in many ways. Already, as said, American investments are being realized in energy, in tourism, in real estate, in infrastructure, but also in R&D and innovation. And this is very important because one of the big advantages of the country is the human capital, which is immense, well-educated, performing at work, and very much willing to undergo a career advancement. And to us politicians, it is very important that we do not suffer anymore the brain drain that we have been suffering for the past 10 years. Just to name a few, lately we have had a very innovative project called Smart and Sustainable Island, and I'm speaking of Astypalea, which is a project that Volkswagen, together with Greece, has been working on. And we are trying e-mobility, electrification, hybrid energy systems, and even autonomous driving in one place, in one island of the Aegean in Astypalea. And to share with you the news of today, we signed a letter of intent with a German automaker that will build in Greece the first automotive assembly plant in the country, employing 1,000 workers and eventually another 5,000 indirect jobs. So we are living a particular moment in time. The pandemic has been an obstacle, but despite that, and considering, of course, that the pandemic will eventually vanish, there is a momentum. Greece is considered in the markets of the world as an investment destination, and it is not a traditional tourism type investment destination only. It is also a place that can attract innovation, technology, R&D, scientific projects. There are people, partners, companies, and individuals and politicians that can speak the same language with the investment community, and that has already been recognized, and we're looking forward to materializing more projects in this country.
Thank you, Minister. And Bill, if I may close with you, on your most recent note as director of the Miller Center, you talked about a turning point, December 14 being a turning point for the US as the electoral college voted, and of course the first vaccine was started being administered in the US. At the same time, you've talked about a secession crisis that President Biden might have to face, and American society, frankly. How do you see what will this pressure within the U.S. affecting bilateral relations, but more generally the U.S. standing in the world?
Well, Katerina, thank you for reading my letter that just went out this morning. First, in answering your first question from our first go-around, what is amazing to me is that during this incredibly divisive period in American politics, how strong the U.S.-Greek relationship has stayed across the Trump administration. I think a great deal of credit for that goes to the career civil servants and foreign service officers serving there in Greece, particularly Ambassador Pyatt, who is truly one of our leading career diplomats. But it even goes to Secretary Pompeo, who is not loved on the Democratic side of the aisle, but I think demonstrated both American support for Greece, but also the importance of the bilateral relationship beyond the current moment. And that even extended back to Prime Minister Tsipras' time in office during the Obama administration. So regardless of the deep partisan divisions in both countries, I think the strength of the relationship goes to some of those deeper political, security, and economic times that both the minister and the ambassador have been mentioning. As for our current moment in the United States, it is a very difficult one. And it goes to some of the things that the ambassador talked about. The failure of our political institutions in periods in the past, foreign wars, very close elections here in the United States that had been ongoing for some time, where in the past Democrats were concerned about how our elections were conducted, and now Republicans were concerned about the current moment. I do think that this has been fueled in recent years by a splintering of our own media and our own society, where across the political spectrum, voices are hearing only what they want to hear, and we're not having the same kind of cross-partisan conversations that we once had. I think President-elect Biden is very committed to forging ties that cut across party lines. And the blog memo that went out as a letter that you mentioned that I sent today really applauds him for doing what President-elect Lincoln did 160 years ago when he was first elected to the presidency, of saying to those who didn't vote for him that we are not enemies, but that we need to be friends. I think his immediate opportunity is to the other 15% or so who did not vote for him, but who are still tethered to, roughly speaking, the same set of institutions that try to filter reality that they share and believe to be correct, that the election did find President-elect Biden to be the winner. That includes the media like the Wall Street Journal and Fox News that called his election early. It goes to the electoral systems that are managed by Republicans, both at the local level and the state level, that affirm those votes, to the courts in the United States, many of whom have Republican-appointed judges, including in the state of Pennsylvania, where the federal judge is a Greek American that was appointed by President Trump that affirmed the outcome in that state. And so I think what you're seeing is a deep part of our political system that affirms the current reality. And President-elect Biden should be building on that and reaching out to those who still have doubts in a fulsome way and hearing their concerns and trying to move forward together.
Thank you, Bill. And I would like to thank you all for this distinguished panel and conversation. We'll have to go to keep the time. Thank you. And hopefully next time we'll be all together in Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for including.
Bye.